Hi there, and welcome to episode 102 of the ADHD Adults podcast. I'm James Brown, biologically male, last time I checked, and as usual, I'm joined by half man, half police training video, Dr. Alex Connor, who exhibits, some elements of maleness, and Mrs ADHD, who, well, the name gives it away, is definitely a man. Alex, hi.
What the hell?
The problem is I wrote in the script, do a deep voice and pretend to be a man, and it's made me laugh and I lost confidence. I was going to say, hey, I like cars and sports and that.
Yeah. You're not fooling anybody. And Mrs ADHD, hi.
Hello.
Short and sweet as always. How are you both? Sam first.
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, really, really busy, but all good.
Wow.
Having a great time.
Yeah. Welcome to the All or Nothing show. Next week, Sam will be in absolute peril and everything's terrible as she catastrophizes. And Alex, he asks wearily, how are you?
I'm excellent, thank you, James. Yeah, after I'm doing some sports things here. After knocking off our 100 that we did at a Jeffrey boycott pace of podcasts, we are now eyeing the big 150, a Daddy 100, trying not to be run out by the Ian Botham that is, people losing interest in us and getting bored. Yeah, I don't know. I'm at my depth. Listener numbers are still very high, according to our tech guy, Metric Steve, I don't know who it is, which as usual baffles us. I mean, well, Sammy's baffled anyway, but it baffles James and me. And one of them sent us a letter.
I call bullshit on that one.
That's right, James. It's from a Robert from Kidderminster.
In a way.
It says, I listened to your special question and answer episodes to celebrate 100 episodes of what is essentially a self-published ego show. And I wondered why nobody asked the question, why hasn't James tried a hairbrush? Great question, Robert. Thank you. I think it's because mirrors don't work very well for him.
I mean, they obviously don't. I own one, as you can now see if you're looking on YouTube.
Hairbrush, not a mirror.
But I do not use. Of course, I don't. Well, I may own mirrors, but I avoid them obviously. But I don't use it. This is just always like this. I mean, I wake up and it's like it.
We've had a real letter. Can I read it out?
No.
No.
I don't know if we've got permission to read this, so I'm not going to say the
probably
name.
not. Maybe say the first name. No, I don't know.
Well, the problem is it's very idiosyncratic, so I'm not going to.
Yeah.
Okay, then.
And it says, hey,
hi.
My sister recommended your podcast. I was diagnosed with ADHD 3 years ago, I think, which I respect, at 44, after decades of feeling like an absolute freak. I have to admit, I didn't think I would bother listening to podcasts, as I found anything on ADHD so boring until I found you both, Sam. I now can pronounce lisdexamfetamine, smiley face. I have listened to all of the podcasts, and I've learned so much, as well as literally pissing myself laughing. I just wanted you both to know how good I've felt about myself since I found this podcast, especially as you both have done so well academically, or one of us has. It was interesting, as one of you said you happened to be in the right place to get a PhD, Wolverhampton Town Centre.
Yeah.
I am doing a master's and feel I've winged my entire career in studies. Thank you both from the bottom of my heart.
Just to clarify there, Alex, I did notice while I wasn't listening much because it was your voice, but you're letting the listener get away with literally pissing myself, which obviously I can't. Oh, Alex has put something in the script. But I use one dangling gerund and I never hear the end of it.
Oh, you've gone for a hard G.
Oh, is it gerund? I don't know. I knew he'd fucking put a dangling gerund.
I think we all know. It's worth looking up. It's interesting.
I mean, is a ding in there?
It's like
oh God,
sweating profusely.
Yeah,
sweating profusely. James didn't like the look of that jogger, and it's a sentence. It's a sentence where it's confusing whether it's James or the jogger that's sweating.
Welcome to Boring Grammar with Dr. Alex Connor.
Internationally, James, great question. We are up by one country to 153 countries, Sam. What are the chances? I think you know what they are.
None. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what they are. James recently texted me from his holiday, and I shit you not, where he was analysing podcast metrics in Ibiza to tell me
I've changed.
You haven't, James. You've unmasked. But he genuinely did do this to tell me we are the #1 mental health podcast in Antigua and Barbuda, even above Ice-T's podcast. So we'd like to say a hearty, and I've got to say hospital pass for this one, James. Thank you. Oh, God. Morning, how things? To, I'm getting cancelled, to probably just a couple who visited Antigua or Barbuda and accidentally chose our podcast instead of a playlist of greatest calypso hits while having their hair inadvisedly braided on the beach or something.
Oh, that was a good one for once, that was. I'm glad I forced you to do it. Anyway, as usual, this use elastoplast plaster floating in the ice-cold Veruca bath of a swimming pool of a podcast is a tragedy in 3 parts. We choose a theme. Last week, we selfishly celebrated reading 100 episodes by answering questions from our loyal and probably very bored with Alex listeners. And this week, we're talking about how ADHD presents in men and women and Draculas, apparently, it says in the script. Thanks, Al. As usual, the 3 parts to this Dog Todd cast include Alex the Psycho Education Monkey, droning on about the evidence-based psychoeducation behind this, our collective personal reflections on how ADHD presents in us as men and a woman, and how it was diagnosed, and finally some top tips for being a man or woman. Anyway, so Alex, you've met a woman, I presume. Tell us about ADHD in men and women.
You know I am actually married, James, and I have been friends with my actual wife for many, many years.
It's amazing to me.
Right, okay. Whilst the diagnostic process definitely means that men and women are treated differently, there are some documented, sometimes very subtle differences in how, on average, our ADHD presents.
Like?
Give me a chance, Sam. God, turning into James. I think this is one that our listeners might be more familiar with because there's a lot of it around on the internet and so on. When we are young, boys with ADHD, usually but not always, show more externalized symptoms, running about, being impulsive for whatever reason. Girls with ADHD, on the other hand, typically, but not always, I'm going to be sick of saying that, show more internalized symptoms. This is partly why there is a myth about ADHD being a disorder of naughty young schoolboys. That and the fact that the tests were designed using boys and the massive systemic lack of understanding of what ADHD fucking actually is. We have to say that numerous issues and valid issues have been raised about the appropriateness of the criteria for diagnosing females, DSM criteria and the others. As a group, females have lower levels of inattention on average and hyperactivity on the rating scales than males. Also, concerns have been raised that because the DSM criteria appear to be more appropriate for males than for females, females who have significant difficulties with attention are often being misdiagnosed with other things. I'm just quickly going to say that we're using the word females and males so much, I feel like an incel on Twitter. But we're doing it advisedly. How you identify is the most important thing to us as individuals and a charity. And we're using the term because papers describe, sometimes it's self-identification, sometimes it's biological sex. So we're using it because we can't distinguish every single different one at the moment. Right, back to what I was saying. Specifically, because women who have inattentive ADHD tend to report low levels of attentiveness, they may be diagnosed with dysthymia or chronic low mood, whereas women who have combined type ADHD and display these high energy levels, impulsivity, verbal aggression, they may be more likely to be misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder. The result of misdiagnoses can result in females receiving, obviously, inappropriate treatment.
For once, that's interesting. And actually, frustratingly, you started with ADHD, so I don't get to ask my usual question. So what about after diagnosis, penis chops?
Penis chops was my father. Call me Peen. I don't know. Well, great question, James. Now, ADHD inattentive type is more, and this is a generalization, klaxon, big klaxon. ADHD inattentive type is more characteristic of females, whereas ADHD high, which I call
Hi.
ADHD high, HI, that's hyperactivity in impulsivity, is more prevalent in males. Symptoms of ADHD, more characteristic of females again, are often reflected in mood or emotional dysregulation, again, often leading to misdiagnosis with internalizing disorders like mood, anxiety disorders. When a misdiagnosis is made, this in turn often leads to inadequate, postponed treatment, worse academic outcomes in young women, etc., etc. Apart from academic impairments, there's problems in psychosocial functioning in girls and women with ADHD. These have been reported again and again.
So it sounds like a bit of a shit show. What about the other stuff, the kind of coexisting shit that comes with ADHD?
Another good question, James. No, it is exactly a great question. So whenever you're talking about any illness like this, you have to. There's a single word which I like, which is psychosocial biology, and loosely, you've got the psychology. That's like your behavior, your mental behavior. You've got the social side of things like stigmas and how you feel in society and how society feels about you, how you behave in society, and the literal biology, how your brain is different and how drugs work. And every time you're talking about depression or anxiety or ADHD, anything like that, you think what are the psychosocial biological implications, because they're all different and all super linked. Is a really, really, really good question.
It is.
James also
can we answer I was about to say, can we answer my question? Maybe
I can't understand it that he asked a good question. That's the bit that's absolutely thrown me. But then blind squirrels sometimes pick up nuts, don't they? So maybe it was that.
They do.
Coexisting conditions. Women with ADHD have been shown to be more often diagnosed with anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, personality disorder than men have. But men with ADHD are more likely to be also diagnosed with schizophrenia, substance use issues.
Okay. And do we both get treated the same? Because me and James are on the same meds, but generally, is that normal? Because I know I'm quite manly.
Yeah, they went, oh, you look manly. Have some Liz.
Yeah.
It's, again, great question. Have you two been on a course? In general. So in general, yes, the treatment is the same. But, and it is a big but, James, female sex is increasingly seen as a risk factor for clinically relevant adverse drug reactions, as they call them, ADRs, with women having a 1.5 to even 1.7 times higher risk of an adverse drug reaction, which means lots of different things, to, frankly, any type of medication for any kind of medical issue or illness. And some people think that is inherent sexism in the system that no one's been checking properly. One recent review of studies found that overall, both girls and women with ADHD were significantly less likely to be prescribed pharmacotherapy, the medicine, than boys and men with this disorder. The difference is far less pronounced in adults, but it is there, and it's almost certainly a cultural thing. In terms of effectiveness, one study examined the efficacy, how well it works, effectiveness of methylphenidate, that's the Ritalin one, in adults, and showed a slightly lesser effect of ADHD medication in adult women compared to adult men. Slightly less. In a study of children and adolescents with ADHD, girls responded slightly less favorably to dexamphetamine than boys. It was a 51% had a favorable response in women and 79% in men, if you want that kind of boringness.
Oh, wow.
A separate study also found a less effective dex and lisdexamphetamine in females when adults. But
God, that's really interesting.
I know, yeah, it's really interesting. And it might be because of how it presents culturally, or the problems people have with their ADHD might be cultural rather than the main three biological factors of ADHD, which the drugs help with. They don't tend to help with the other ones as much. Interestingly, within the framework of science, a couple of studies of the non-stimulant medication, the atomoxetine one, have suggested that may work better on women than men. So one study showed that women given atomoxetine consistently had larger treatment effects than men for emotional dysregulation and social life, what we were just saying. In a longitudinal study on adults with ADHD, that means over long time, the scores on one of these scales for adult ADHD attention, one of the ASRS type scores, increased significantly more in women with ADHD than in men with ADHD. Women improved significantly more on the subscales hyperactivity and impulsivity, emotional dysregulation, and on total score. So there is a tiny, weeny bit of evidence that women might benefit more from non-stimulant medication than stimulant medication. But I would still just go with what your doctor says.
I think that's really interesting. The one thing I'll add just before we go to a break is that anecdotally, and this has come from a source I do trust, there is more screening out of women in the diagnostic process than there is men. So often you may hear people say that they're out there on the waiting list, and then after 6 months you have a meeting with somebody, you don't really know who, and they ask you some questions, and then you either get a letter, Sam, we can hear that, you either get a letter saying your next appointment will be X, or you're off the list. And in some cases, as much as 90% of women are being screened out at that point, which is significantly higher than men. And again, it's this systemic and cultural lack of understanding of ADHD. Right then, we'll go to a break now. Oh, no, we won't, because Alex didn't put his hand up.
I just wanted to say, well, why isn't there an International Men's Day?
Exactly. Exactly. Sam celebrates it. Right. Yeah, we'll go to a break and we'll be back in part 2.
Bye.
Alex, hi.
Aight. What's up? Hello, Governor.
Welcome back to episode 102, Dalmatians, the sequel of the ADHD Adults. We are talking about, in part 2, ADHD in men and women. As always, we've got personal reflections of men and women, or ADHD, or both of those things, or something. I don't know how we do this. So, James, you're half a man, half biscuit. What are your personal reflections?
Half man, half biscuit. I mean, that's the 90s. I'm sure that was the 90s, wasn't it? Half man, half biscuit.
It was, but as you've referenced Jeffrey boycotting both of them already.
Amazing. Okay, clearly there is a massive bias that exists in society, in education, in the healthcare system for women and other groups, but we're specifically focusing on sex/gender in this episode. There is a massive bias against women. From getting picked up in school, to getting referred from the GP, to getting screened out when you're being referred, to getting a diagnosis, to getting on the right treatment. This, whether it's my justice sensitivity or whether it's the fact that I'm married to something that approximates a woman, really fucking annoys me. And I think as part of what we do as a charity, I think we really need to kind of work on this. And I think as a group that has, some status in the field, we probably need to do more through social media, etc. But there's enough change that's needed for ADHD. Clearly, we do need to have more legislative protection. We do need to have more education. But this is kind of, if not equally as big an issue, is more of an issue, because if you think of all of those women who've probably more than men had that hard life, there's not a ding there. I wanted there to be. Because they weren't picked up as children, because they struggle to get support for menopause, and at the same time struggle to get support for ADHD. It's an absolute fucking shit show, and it has to change. And I actually think that NICE, the National Institute for Clinical Health and Excellence, that write the guidelines upon which diagnosis and treatment are based, really need to fucking look at this. They need to look at, when they update, they need to look at the evidence in men and women more than just the evidence for adults and for children. It needs big studies, Al. And we've talked about this before. At the minute, nobody's really funding ADHD research. The charities don't have enough money to do it. The government's funding schemes aren't interested yet. I think as it becomes an issue and as the NHS starts to struggle to pay for this, as it already is, there will be more kind of Medical Research Council or National Institute for Health Research type funding for this. But until we've got those big studies, the NICE guidelines won't change. And until the NICE guidelines won't change, GPs won't, and other healthcare professionals won't be able to better support women. It's something that really fucks me off as one of those kind of pretend I am a feminist. Not that I really understand the term fully, but I'd certainly advocate for women. And therefore, for me, my reflection is that I always talk about how I come from a position of privilege. And actually, this has fucked some men off when I've done it at talks. They've come up afterwards and said, I'm a middle-aged white male, I'm not privileged. And I've tried to explain that it's not the same thing. We're not all privileged, but we have privilege by being a demographic that doesn't have the same challenges that other demographics have. And as somebody that acknowledges that privilege, this needs to change. Sam, what about you?
Well, yeah, all the things. Obviously, I am a woman, and I've talked about this a lot. I don't know if I have or not, so I might repeat myself a little bit here. But yeah, when I was very, very young, I mean, obviously, I'm hyperactive, and did when I was at nursery was really hyperactive, and I've talked before about how I was hit for that. So I learned to push it all internally and became a daydreamer. So probably maybe didn't present classically as a female initially, but then did, because I became a daydreamer, and it, when I pushed everything inside, it made it even more kind of hyperactive inside. And all my life I was treated with anxiety and depression, like you were saying, that, you know, is commonly done, because I didn't know what it was, and I masked so well, because you kind of have to hide it. You've got to, you think that there's something wrong with you, and you just want to, and I think there's so many pressures on women as well to be a certain way, that you do mask, you do pretend that you're coping, and that you're doing all the things, and that you're not feeling all the things that you are. So I think eventually then, when everything went to shit, when I got to perimenopause, I'd masked so well until then, everybody was like, well, why would you need a diagnosis? Like, there's nothing wrong with you. And nobody had any idea about the way that I was struggling internally. And it was hard, I think, for me to differentiate between the perimenopause and ADHD, because a lot of the symptoms are similar. You know, you've got the brain fog, you've got emotional dysregulation, you've got a lot of the things that are the same. So it wasn't until, and it took me 2 years to get on HRT, so it wasn't until after I was treated on HRT that I realized that it solved a lot of things, but it didn't solve anything. Everything. I've forgotten what I'm talking about now.
Amazing.
Yeah, but the thing I wanted to say, sorry, I should have prepared for this, but I didn't. The thing I wanted to say was I did mask really well, and I coped really well. You don't get to my age without having some coping mechanisms, but during perimenopause, I lost them all. And before perimenopause, I would not have been diagnosed, because I wasn't struggling in 2 or more areas of my life. I was masking, but outwardly I wasn't struggling. I was getting by. So I think it's probably worth, I speak to a lot of women that say, I don't think I'll be diagnosed, because, and should I? And actually, this is a good question for you too. Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm all over the place. A lot of women come to me and say, I'm not struggling in 2 or more areas, and I'm masking so well that I don't present as having ADHD. What should I do? Should I lie and exaggerate? And it's a really difficult one to answer, James.
The first thing I'd say is we obviously have poor metacognition, and we may think that we're succeeding. And Alex always says to me when I say, "Well, I wasn't struggling in 2 domains," and he says, "You fucking were, you idiot!
Yeah, you were, yeah.
You had massive mental health issues. Your work was killing you because you were saying yes to everything. And although you weren't externally failing, I was struggling to engage with work. I hated doing work. I had massive debts at home. We were, up and down at times as a couple." And I was struggling with, very good. And I was struggling with engaging with tasks around the house. So sometimes getting an external viewpoint, if you've got a partner that lives with you, asking them, about how you cope. If you've got a friend at work that you can confide in, asking them about externally what you appear like, but think about the internal things. It might not be that I got 2 promotions. Externally, that looks like dead successful, but internal, I was a fucking hot mess that hated myself, thought I was shit, was making loads of mistakes.
Yeah, that's it. Redefine what struggling means to you. Have a look at what success means. What is the cost of that success internally? That's the question you should be asking yourself. How much do I have to give mentally and physically to achieve that? And what's going to happen?
Sorry, I was just wondering as well, because we get so good, women, I presume more than men, but I don't know. We get so good at hiding our struggles and pretending that we're doing really well. I wonder if that translates when we're doing the ASRS, that we're just not used to admitting that we're struggling. And, that's a really uncomfortable thing for us to admit. And we're used to pretending that we're doing well.
I mean, that could be the reason it's not as good at all in women as it is in men. We've talked before about how the mind-wandering scale, the Muse, might be a more effective test for inattentive women. And it may be that women are more able to accurately verbalize their mind-wandering than they are to fill in the inattentive parts of the ASRS. Alex, what are your reflections?
All of that, really. Yeah. There's loads I could say on the there is a male privilege, and it's not about equality, it's about equity, because at the moment the system is equal, but the barriers faced by women are different to the ones faced by men, and we've equally removed the male-orientated barriers. So that isn't equality, and we need equity. We need to start removing the barriers for women. But because I'm a man, and this is personal reflections, I just want to point out that I have been told off for this before, but I genuinely think that with racism, sexism, and ableism, we need to include classism. I think that one of the real problems in society is that we don't recognize that working class is a seriously inequitable position to be in. And the three of us know full well what that fucking feels like, to grow up in an environment where you haven't got loads of money, and you don't have the family connections, and you just I am working class. Not. But I was.
Mansion.
It's not a mansion, Sam. Told you.
It's a castle.
And it's just a big dungeon with a shed on top. But I was, and I grew up, and you feel it, don't you, inside you? It never goes away.
No.
You look for the second cheapest bottle of wine to look posh. That's what you do on any restaurant. And I think that we need to deal with that, because it's actually a bone of contention, and people are getting, especially I know working class men are not getting any support, and everyone's going, well, aren't you privileged? And they're thinking, well, fuck, I don't feel it. In fact, I feel really, really poor, and I can't afford dinner. Can somebody, where does my privilege come? Does it come through the roof?
I mean,
when do I apply?
If they're working class, they probably wouldn't say dinner unless they're on about lunch, would they? They'd probably say lunch and tea if they were working class. That shows how middle class you are, that you obviously say dinner.
I know, yeah. I've literally chosen to change.
Yeah,
to say
we
lunch
know.
and dinner. I even changed my accent, didn't I? It's pathetic. Can
I add something I forgot? Because obviously I've come across as very much, let's just support women. There's something I think is really important to acknowledge. If you look at the demographics of people that engage with us, the podcast is roughly 50-50, male and female. But on social media, and Dracula's, on social media, it's 80% women and 20% men. And what that suggests to me is that men are probably less willing to publicly be seen to be engaging in a social media channel or a charity that is involved with something that is considered to be associated with mental health. And that also has to change. Men have to create a safe space for men to talk about these things. The joke that I do about erectile dysfunction is, but the talks I do.
Your tiny little wee talks.
Yeah. I don't like to talk about them. I do an erectile dysfunction joke at those talks. It's based on a real event that happened. And I had one man that came down afterwards and said, thank you so much for saying that, because I can't ever say that in front of my friend. That would be me forever being labelled as, floppy Dave, or whatever. His name wasn't Dave, obviously, or whatever. And I think it's really important as males that we don't just create a safe space for women, but we start changing the fucking toxic masculinity, can't talk about these things approach.
You're right. And James and I tease each other all the time, but what we don't ever do is block each other from texting and talking about emotionally important things.
Yeah.
Whatever I'm feeling, I'll text James, and actually I'll talk to Jack about it. And some of the other people in Team ADHD, men and women, and that was really, really hard. difficult to do from the background of keep calm and carry on. You know, my parents were war generation, and I started to talk emotionally with them, with my dad, and that is really, really difficult as well. But it's incredibly valuable, and I know that they fucking hate it.
I think that's that. Oh, can I just say though, it's a really good point. I think when you feel that you're marginalized, like women can feel like we are, you do group together and support each other, don't you? And you become this really good. We're really good at kind of, you know, holding other women up, and I don't think men are. No. Unless
and they want to.
I don't think men are, and are probably scared of doing that publicly. That's a really good.
Yeah.
Well done, James.
Thank you. Have we got time? Anyone fancy a game?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think so. No.
Oh, okay. Well, it's tough, Alex, because you don't get a choice in this.
Right.
Right.
I'm winning easily.
You're 9-7 up for the year, for the calendar year. So
it's funny how I haven't forgotten this year, isn't it? That I'm winning. I always know the fucking score.
And I haven't either, because you're fucking ahead. Right. So it's about fags. Obviously I'm still smoking at the minute, and I brought some cigarettes back from holiday. And this was just yesterday, actually, and I lost them, and it took me ages to find them. And obviously, I'd put them in a stupid place. So which stupid place did I put my cigarettes? There are three options, Alex. Had I, A, put my cigarettes in the fridge? Had I, 2, put my cigarettes in the drawer in my office that is labelled laminating pouches? And had I, 3, put my cigarettes in the first aid bag we've got for medicines?
I think that it isn't fridge, because your fridge is absolutely rammed with blood. Those like pouches you get from the hospital. And I think, continuing the theme, it's not the first aid bag, because that's just full of garlic and crucifixes. Crucifixes? I don't know how to pluralize that. Awkward. So I'm saying laminated pouches drawer. I can only assume it's kangaroo related. Look at his smug, shitty little face. Look at it.
Yeah.
Was it first aid? It was first aid.
It was first aid, yeah. And I only found it because I wanted to find some antiseptic cream.
The worst is I couldn't think of something funny about a laminated pouch drawer. So
you didn't think of anything funny about any of the other things.
Eviscerating. That is eviscerating. Alex, that's 9-8. I'm catching up. I'm coming after you. And in part 3, we will do top tips or something related.
Tip topics.
Trumpet.
Welcome back to episode 102 of the ADHD Adults podcast. This is part 3, where we'll be telling you our top tips on ADHD in males and females. James.
That was actually pretty spot on, wasn't it?
Honestly, I can't believe it.
Right. My top tips is.
What is your top tip? What are?
So when I do something like that, Alex, is your instant response like burning inside, kind of, I can't believe he said that, I don't like bad grammar? Or is it, oh my God, that's brilliant, he said something incorrect, and I can therefore...
You know, my favourite thing about the grammar pedant Nazi thing is that I genuinely believe that language is an organic media. And however you use language, whatever grammar you use, whatever dialect you use, if you communicate your point and the person receiving understands, that is language, that is grammar. Other people's rules don't matter. They're bullshit. Apart from James.
Again, welcome to Boring Grammar, the podcast with Dr. Alex Connor. Getting back to my top tips. So again, I'm gonna shut up. Be prepared to fight, for our community, fight for our community. And what that means is men advocate for women, and that's men in general, that's men in the workplace, that's men in education, that's men in the NHS and other healthcare providers. Advocate for women. If you're a healthcare professional that's involved in screening, Alex, I can hear that, in screening in screening, diagnosis, referrals. Stop and think. Educate yourself about the fact that men and women present differently and may require different treatment. Educators, advocate for girls. You know, if a colleague, if you raise a suspicion that a girl in the class may have ADHD, and you get the kind of typical, oh, well, no, I mean, they're not a boy running around, then educate the person you work with. Equally, and we've talked about this before, one of the problems with children getting diagnosis is that you have to have issues in 2 domains. Kids only have 2 domains, home and school. And therefore, if the school report says, no, they're daydreaming, maybe a bit daydreamy, but they're quiet and they're not disruptive, again, advocate for them. Actually, if that report's being made, educate the person that's writing it, saying, you do know that ADHD presents differently. You know, it's not just about are they running around and being disruptive. So everyone really needs to read, learn, and advocate for, I mean, all groups that are important, but especially for women when it comes to the pre-diagnosis, diagnosis, and post-diagnosis journey. And then equally, guys, men out there, let's just fucking stop all this bullshit about you can't have a mental health issue, you can't be neurodevelopmentally divergent, you can't talk about issues around sex, toxic masculinity, the Andrew Tate, if you like, generation of men that think it's cool to talk about how women are subservient and how cool and tough and hard you are. That's kind of fine, you know, if you're a psychopath. But in general, what you're doing is you're stopping other men from being able to say, I need help. There's a reason that the demographic that has the highest trigger warning klaxon suicide rates is men aged 45 to 49. And I know that viscerally because, as we all know, my mental health ain't so good. And I'm lucky enough that I can open up. Imagine if you can't.
Yeah.
Imagine if you're in that demographic and you can't say to somebody, I feel sad. Men, we need to change this.
Yeah.
Alex?
It's a good one, this. So life's like a race from the bottom of a skyscraper to the very top. And it's really hard. Wherever you start, whichever floor you start on, it's fucking difficult to run up a skyscraper. So if you're halfway up, it's a fucking long way. And you're competing against people who've only got a couple of floors to run up because they were born privileged. But to not acknowledge that some people start right at the bottom, aren't even let in through the doors, is to deny the existence of privilege. But figure out what your privilege is, and then here's the tip: exploit it mercilessly. Exploit it. If you're a white woman, exploit the fact that people don't treat you with racism. If you like me, maybe I was working class, but I'm a white man, making sure that you exploit that. And when you've exploited it, when you feel powerful, when you feel successful, fucking acknowledge it. It's okay, because you've got to work really hard to be successful. You have to run fast up that skyscraper. But you have to acknowledge it. If you don't, you're going to be a dick, and you're going to block people, the very people that need that leg up, that need their barriers removed. You're going to block them. So as soon as you have power, as soon as you feel safe enough, then you can support people. Then you can be generous. You've got the capacity for that. And if you haven't got that capacity, if you don't feel supportive, talk to people like us who are lucky, who have been lucky and privileged and got up to the. Well, James hasn't. James isn't allowed through the doors because of a couple of incidents. We don't need to go into them.
I can turn into a bat and float up.
That's true. Yeah,
that skyscraper. So.
And I wish somebody'd teach working class boys to cry, because I can't, and crying is incredibly fucking.
I mean, you probably can.
Oh, that joke's really too far. I like it. I wish I could cry, and it's physically, I reckon, it's such a block, and it's such an unhealthy blockage, and I hate it. I hate that I can't, because it's healthy. Sam, tip topics.
Yeah,
I'm yours.
Pretty similar to you guys, actually. Be honest, be open, tell people that you're struggling. It doesn't help anyone to keep it inside. I know that you want to appear like you're maybe that like you're coping, and that but what it actually does is it then stops other people from opening up as well. The more that you open it up, the more that other people feel that they can open up. Yeah, it is. yeah, the more we talk about it, the more other people can. Because one thing I've noticed is that being an oversharer, as I am, at work, I will tell people everything. And the amount of people that you think have really got their shit together that will go, actually, I'm exactly the same. And it allows this space then for people to open up and actually acknowledge that there are problems going on. And if you hide it, it's really difficult then to get help for it, or to get help for the right thing, because you're not talking about it. And also I wanted to say, if you're like me, growing up in a family where everybody had ADHD, I just presumed that it was normal. And sometimes you've got to look outside your circle to try and judge whether, you are coping with life the same as other people, and also prepare for perimenopause. You think shit's bad now, it might get a lot worse. And, you're going to need a lot of support during that time. So, yeah, it's really difficult. It's like adolescence, but on speed. But not on speed. You haven't got the speed, you need speed. No.
Take speed. There's your tip.
That was brilliant, and mainly because it was slightly shorter than normal. Anyway, we've given up on product recommendations because no one's got the time to actually find one. So that was episode 102 of the ADHD Adults podcast, where we talked about ADHD in men and women. If by miracle you enjoyed this, why not support the charity on the link provided? Because otherwise Alex is going to have to rent his head out as a pom-pom for the shittest cheerleading squad ever. As usual, get in touch via Discord, the socials. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye all.
Trigger warning, klaxon, 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 big klaxon.